Hello, good evening. Happy Philippine Eagle Week. And thank you for joining us wherever you may be right now. If you're watching us, we are live on Facebook, on our Facebook page, and on our YouTube channel. So thank you for spending your evening with us. And if you have anything you'd like to ask or comments or feedback as we um, move along with our conversation tonight, please feel free to chat with us as well. My name is Andy, and I welcome you all to Conversation on Conservation, where we tackle Philippine eagle conservation challenges and discover a way forward for our national birds' survival in the 21st century. This is a three-part dialogue with raptor conservation experts from the US and Australia, and we will be talking to them about the different modern threats to Philippine eagles and explore practical and sound solutions. These solutions will be framed in the light of the pandemic, global climate changes, and other forecasted biodiversity threats of the new century. Conversation on Conservation Philippine Eagle Week Edition is brought to you by San Roque Power Corporation and OmniPay Incorporated, together with PLDT, Ulticom Builders Incorporated, and Energy Development Corporation, with the support of FDC Utilities Incorporated. In this episode, Global Raptors in Peril and the Philippine Eagle Case, we will talk about what is happening to raptors in other parts of the world, the threats they face, and what is being done to protect them. We can draw insights and ideas from this discussion that can help us in our own conservation efforts for the Philippine eagle. With me is our Director for Research and Conservation. Once again, let's all welcome Dr. Jayson Ibañez.
Hi, Andy, and good evening to everyone. Happy Philippine Eagle Week. And again, I'm so delighted to do our second episode with you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Andy. How are you?
Great. I'm good. And by the way, happy birthday!
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Sa mga nanonood ngayon, batiin nyo naman si Sir Jay. Happy birthday sa chat.
Maraming salamat. It's a wonderful day indeed.
So imagine every year you're celebrating your birthday on Eagle Week, no?
Yes, last day of the Philippine Eagle Week celebration. So, double celebration.
Yeah, kung kailan busy tayo lahat.
Exactly.
Why not? Okay, so this is going to be another fun conversation, Sir Jay. So let me just introduce our guest tonight. Our guest is with the PEF's longtime conservation partner, the Peregrine Fund. He earned his doctorate from Auburn University. His graduate work focused on testing and improving methods to monitor birds and determine their habitat needs. He finished his postdoctoral research at Boise State University. He has published numerous articles, including the effects of climate change on bird diversity across North America. He was formerly the director of American Kestrel Partnership, and currently he is the director of Global Conservation Science of the Peregrine Fund. Let's all welcome to the conversation Dr. Chris McClure.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for
Hi,
having me. Appreciate the introduction, and happy birthday, Jayson.
Well, thanks, Chris. We're very happy that you're able to join us, despite that it's very early there in the US.
Good morning to you.
Thanks. I've got my coffee right here.
That's
Perfect.
good.
Perfect.
Great.
Okay, so again, Chris, welcome to Conversation and Conservation. We're very happy to have you on board to our second episode. Again, Conversation and Conservation. And without further delay, let me get into it. So yesterday, Andy and I explored the challenges that the country's national bird faces through two cases of rescued Philippine eagles in 2021. In this conversation with you, we would like to have a bigger picture and talk about what is happening to raptors around the world. Chris, you and your colleagues published a paper in 2018 entitled State of the World's Raptors, Distributions, Threats, and Conservation Recommendations in the journal Biological Conservation. Could you tell us about the paper and broad strokes about your findings?
Yeah, sure thing. Well, the most important finding we had was that 18% of raptors are threatened globally with extinction, and 52% of raptors have declining global populations. So that's a pretty whopping number. It means over half of all raptor species globally are in decline. And we looked at where these threatened and declining species are occurring, and it turns out that the Philippines actually ranks 9th out of all countries in the world for number of threatened species and 12th for number of declining species. And that's out of 233 countries globally. So ranking pretty high up there. So Philippines is definitely an important place in our global scheme of things in saving raptors.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing this data, Chris. Well, now we know, it's my first time to know that the Philippines is actually in the top 10 countries with the greatest number of threatened raptors. And top of the head, of course, that would include the critically endangered Philippine eagle, and then we have the threatened Pinskers hawk eagle on Mindanao and Visayas, and the Philippine hawk eagle of Luzon, and perhaps several threatened species of owls. Chris, I'm just curious. Apart from the Philippines, could you also share which countries belong to the so-called top 10?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So Kenya is number 1. Kenya is really sort of ground zero for a lot of raptor conservation issues. Then we've got Sudan, Indonesia, India, Ethiopia, Tanzania, South Sudan, Eritrea, and then there's Philippines coming in at number 9, and then Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, is number 10.
Wow. Chris, if I may ask, would you know why raptors are most threatened in these countries, and are there like any issues that in common?
Yeah, one thing that isn't such a concern is that you have to have a lot of raptors to have a lot of threatened raptors, right? And so like a lot of these countries have a high species richness of raptors in the first place. Right. But a lot of these countries are also clustered together in Africa, right? And so they probably share something in common. And that thing is Africa is going through a vulture crisis right now. There's lots of vultures in Africa. You can imagine with all that wild game out there, lots of stuff is dying commonly, lots of big animals. That creates great conditions for vultures, and the vultures perform a great service there. Cleaning up all that dead, rotting meat, if you will. But there's a lot of conservation issues going on in Africa, and that lead to vulture declines. It's basically vulture poisoning is what is going on over there.
Right. And this just recently started? I mean, the vulture crisis?
It was realized with a paper in, I think, 2016. By Darcy.
Quite recently.
Yeah, it was realized recently. It's been going on for a little while, but it was demonstrated in a paper led by the Peregrine Fund's own Darcy Ogata.
I see.
Yes, and I believe the vultures of Africa is practically your poster group, for threats and human persecution to raptors. And I can understand that the severity of the case have warranted to call this what you call the Vulture Crisis. Could you tell us more about what this Vulture Crisis is?
Sure. Well, I should mention, so the world is experiencing 2 vulture crises right now. There's one in South Asia, mostly India and Pakistan, those areas, and then also in Africa. And these are all poisoning issues. The one in India and South Asia is because of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, veterinary drugs. Folks give these drugs, mostly a drug called diclofenac, to their cows. The cows then die. The vultures eat the cows, and the vultures get poisoned from this drug. It's been banned since 2006, and that ban is it seems preliminarily to be working. But the vulture numbers have plummeted by 97%, and it takes a while for vulture numbers to come back. And so those birds are still critically endangered. That's why India shows up in the top 10 of threatened species is partly because of that.
Yeah.
In Africa, it's still poisoning, but it's a whole different story actually. There's different kinds of poisoning going on, if you will. There's retaliatory poisoning, where if so there's a lot of pastoralists in Africa, a lot of people herding livestock, and there's also a lot of mammalian predators there, so lions and hyenas and that sort of thing, that will often get to the livestock. And so the pastoralist wants to retaliate or kill the lion or the predator that killed his livestock. So he puts out a poisoned carcass, just trying to poison that predator. And either the vulture eats that carcass, or the lion eats the carcass, dies. The lion is now poisoned, and the vulture eats the lion. So this retaliatory poisoning isn't on purpose. It's not trying to kill the vulture. It's just a sort of collateral damage there.
Right.
Now, there's another kind of poisoning that's going on called sentinel poisoning. And this sentinel poisoning, it's pretty insidious. It's done by poachers who will kill an elephant or a rhino, and then they'll poison the carcass of the rhino, so that when the vultures come in, the vultures will die, and that prevents them from circling overhead and alerting the authorities to the crime, basically. So that's a really bad one. It's really hard to stop. Then the last one that we usually talk about is belief-based use, and it's where vultures are being used in traditional ceremonies, and so people are intentionally poisoning vultures so that they can use them for these traditional ceremonies.
Yeah. Well, it's really very interesting. While you were discussing about retaliatory poisoning, while you were telling the story, it sort of resonates with what's happening with the Philippine eagles. There's eagles are being trapped on purpose as a retaliation by farmers to eagles that are preying on domestic animals. And so I think that would also an appropriate term for that kind of shall we say persecution of eagles, no, retaliatory trapping, if we talk about Philippine eagles. And it's also really sad, it's really sad that traditional belief, as you mentioned, is not also helping the species. We're hearing about it. I think as far as the conservation program is concerned, we're quite relieved that we don't have these issues yet for the Philippine eagles. There's no traditional beliefs that they should kill the Philippine eagle or maybe use it in rituals. So I guess in this aspect, our national bird, in a way, is relatively in a better position than well, they're both critically endangered, the vultures and the Philippine eagle.
If I may ask,
yes,
I wanted to ask about what sort of approach do you take with the issue on retaliatory poisoning, in terms of trying to address that issue? How do you approach the community, for example, that's involved in it? How do you do it? Just the broad strokes.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of a multi-pronged approach. One thing they've done is they have a poisoning hotline where if someone finds a carcass, they can call the hotline, and trained teams come out and clean up the area, and that's really important because you don't want that carcass sitting there poisoning more and more and more birds. You want it cleaned up. They also take forensic evidence for prosecution and sort of protect the crime scene type stuff. But a lot of this is sort of education type. Type it's we actually found in our paper that so the number one threat to raptors around the world is habitat destruction. The number two threat has more to deal with the poisoning issues and the vulture crises, and that's poisoning of various kinds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that the number one conservation action that needs to be taken is habitat destruction. And the number two is or habitat preservation is the most thing that needs to happen. And then number two is education and outreach around the world to keep people from poisoning, shooting, killing raptors, basically. And so we have a very outreach component in Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really nice that we have these options, several options to doing conservation work. And as you said, it should be multiple approaches. Find as many suitable sort of tools, to address different issues on the ground. And so, speaking of tools or like approaches. One of the sort of promising approaches that we're also looking at for Philippine eagles, and it's also happening in some species, is conservation translocation. So, Chris, we're just curious. Do you think conservation translocation, or the intentional movement of raptors to repopulate vacant habitat within a raptor's historical range, is a viable conservation option for some raptors? And if you think it's yes, could you cite one or two species that might have benefited from these initiatives?
Yeah, sure thing. So translocation can work what seem to be miracles under the right circumstances. The Peregrine Fund actually got its start doing translocation. Dr. Tom Cade was concerned about peregrine falcon population declines mostly in North America, and he was a falconer, and so he knew how to breed these birds in captivity. And he basically took that knowledge. He was with Cornell at the time, the Cornell Lab for Ornithology. He basically took that knowledge and applied it at almost an industrial scale to breed these peregrine falcons and release them. Of course, the problem was DDT. That's why the population had declined so much, and so because DDT had lessened in the environment by that time, they released these birds and they did great. And so it's one of the poster children it's one of the original translocation programs that actually worked. Their Peregrine Fund has also been involved with some other ones, like California condor was down to 22 individuals in 1982, and today, mostly because of captive breeding, there's 500 individuals in existence, and about half of those are in the wild.
Nice.
So that's a pretty great success story. But even outside of North America, probably the most dramatic example of translocation working that I know of is the Mauritius Kestrel. It was down to 4 individuals.
Wow.
That was in the 1970s, and it came back and it numbers about 800 birds now, which is, it really just seems kind of like a miracle. It's pretty impressive.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
From four birds to 800 birds, right? Yeah,
it's encouraging about for this approach. I wanted to know, how do we know that the translocation is a viable conservation approach for a species? Like, how do we know that we should do it for this particular bird, for example?
Well, you have to make sure there's space for it. So there's habitat. You got to have a place to put it. It has to have a home to live in. Generally, whatever threat that caused it to be so endangered in the first place needs to be assuaged or handled or taken away in that habitat. So, for instance, if shooting was a major problem, then you wanna, before you release the bird, you want to have a major education push in those areas to make sure that they don't just get shot out of them. And it was the same thing with DDT in the peregrine falcon. If DDT was still out there, you can put all those birds. You can release all those birds, but they're not going to breed because of DDT. So you really need to make sure that whatever poison or whatever threat is going on has lessened.
Right, right. And it's important also to do like to release a lot at one time, like a lot of individuals. Like how
Yeah.
many are we
Uh,
looking at? What's
well, yeah,
ideal? Or is it
I don't know if there's a good rule of thumb actually, but it's
okay?
you definitely want to release a lot, and you want to release them together because they need to pair up if they're
Okay.
going to breed eventually. And so yeah, the sort of the rule of thumb is a lot and together.
Oh,
Right.
at the same
So
time. Okay. Yeah.
yeah. So again, adequate habitat should be available where the
Mm-hmm.
birds should be released, and then you should
Right.
have fair amount of birds to be released in a particular area. And then again, as Chris reiterated, the threats that led to the decline of the original population should be addressed. So perhaps that would be shooting and hunting, and massive education campaigns, really massive and intimate, meaningful education campaigns would really help. And I couldn't agree more, Chris. These are really the nutriments to a very successful conservation and translocation. And we really admire the effort that the Peregrine Fund and your partners have placed into making these success stories happen. Thanks for sharing that. So again, at this juncture, we're also interested to know, apart from success in conservation translocation, other successful conservation projects of the Peregrine Fund to date, and perhaps on the aspect of saving critically endangered species and using multiple approaches, and perhaps could you also identify these species and explain what are the factors that you think contributed to this success?
Yeah, one of the most recent successes that the Peregrine Fund has had is probably the Ridgeways Hawk. And so this is a species that is endemic, so it only lives on this one island of Hispaniola in the Caribbean. It's the island shared by Haiti and the Dominican Republic. And it was formerly only found in this one national park within the Dominican Republic. And so it's critically endangered species. And it was threatened by shooting and parasitic bot flies. So these bot flies lay their eggs on the nestlings of the birds. The larvae then hatch, and the larvae then feed on the nestlings. So they burrow in and eat the nestlings, and it ruins the productivity of the population. Very few nestlings end up fledging. So the Peregrine Fund took basically a three-pronged approach to this. First, we started an education campaign. We got to try to get people to stop shooting the hawks. And so we did that, and that hopefully helps the survival of adults and juveniles. Then our biologists, Thomas and Christine Hayes, actually came up with this ingenious method of handling the bot flies, and they actually sprayed it with we call it frontline flea spray here in America.
Yeah. We use it for the dogs.
Yeah, exactly. We use it
Yeah.
on our pets. And so we spray it. They spray it on the nestlings, and it prevents the bot flies from killing the nestlings. It doubled the productivity of the population.
Wow.
And so another thing they did, Thomas and Christine, because there was so much productivity now, they have extra nestlings they can take out of the nest and release them into Punta Cana, which is a resort area. So they took them out of the national park where they were being shot and put them into the resort area where presumably no one's going to shoot them because it's a resort, right? And they have full cooperation with the resort staff. And so they created a whole new population that seems to be doing pretty well. And so Ridgeways Hawk was actually predicted to go in 2011. There was a study done that Ridgeways Hawk, it said Ridgeways Hawk is going to go extinct in 20 years. So that would be by 2031, right? We wouldn't have much time left if we just started. But the population's on the increase now, and so we no longer predict that it will go extinct. In fact, it seems like it might soon be uplisted or downlisted, whichever one it is, to
That's
less than
great.
to endangered instead of critical.
Endangered, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Was there any particular reason as to why they were being shot, these birds?
Yeah, it's a good it's sort of a good story of how you can target your education campaign to the reason that it's being shot, right? And so these birds feed on, they will hunt and kill chicks of
Mm,
chickens, right? And the young chickens. They won't eat the old ones because they're too big, but
mm,
they'll eat the young ones
Mm,
because they're young and they're easy to get, right?
right.
And so what the Peregrine Fund did, what they realized, and this was, I think, Marta Curdy who figured this out, was we gave people chicken coops to keep there, just like wire cages, to keep the
mm.
young chickens in, to protect
Mhm.
them from the hawks until they're old enough to get out, and then they can walk around. So it really helps sort of make peace between the people and the hawks.
Right.
Yeah, and it's apparently a win-win situation. You know, they get these cages for free,
Yeah.
and that saves them cost as well, which they can use for other, livelihood priorities, and they get to spare the chick from mortality.
Being
So
eaten.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
a very indeed a very very innovative approach. Yeah, it also reminded us of possible ways that we can also perhaps prevent Philippine eagles from feeding on
Yeah.
domestic piglets as well as
Yeah.
livestock.
Mhm.
It's
Livestock.
also
Yeah.
a big issue. So listening to you, Chris, I think there's similarities in terms of the situation of the Ridgeway Hawk, and of course our very own national bird. No, well, we don't have issues of parasites, infesting
Mhm.
our young chicks. In fact, we found out, based on monitoring several nests, across Mindanao, that the eagles are breeding quite well. They don't have our
Good.
Philippine eagles doesn't have issues with breeding failures, and it's basically apparently high mortality rates with immature birds, and that is in a way alarming. I think what we're missing right now
Yeah.
is sort of doing the modeling, predicting with the status quo, predicting when the Philippine eagle would be lost, just like what you did with
Yeah.
the Ridgeway
Actually,
Hawk.
right.
So these are all like also good lessons
Mm-hmm.
for our work. And so speaking of the Philippine eagle, which is also an IUCN and critically endangered, and perhaps also the most threatened raptor in Asia. And you've seen some of our films, no?
Oh yeah.
Bird of Prey and then Queen of Birds, and of course, having doing to do research on the global status of raptors. You're very familiar with the status of our birds. What do you think, should be the research and conservation priorities for the species in the next 10 years?
Yeah, well, it's really important to figure out just how many pairs you have, and where they are, so that you can target those areas for absolute preservation, right? And it'd be great to know if there are any non-territorial birds out there. It'd be good to know how much habitat is still remaining,
Mm-hmm.
and how much is occupied versus not occupied. That's really important. And also, so that way you can target those areas for conservation and make sure that they aren't cut down. Basically, protect the habitat is the really important issue there.
When you
Yeah.
say non-territorial, do you mean like the surplus birds? Is this what it means?
Yeah, we call them floaters
Mm.
Floaters, yeah.
in the business, but
Okay.
they're non-territorial birds, and
Mm,
they're really important because they'll show you that there isn't enough habitat in that area, basically, or if there aren't
okay.
enough mates. Uh,
Hmm.
because basically they would hold a territory if they could, but they can't
Yeah.
find a place or find a mate. And so they just kind of float around. They aren't tied to a territory. So they're really important to know. It basically means that your habitat is either saturated or birds, or you have habitat, but the birds aren't dispersing to it. And so that's one thing that a translocation program can do, is take the birds and put them where the good habitat is.
Yeah, thanks for
Right.
explaining
Okay.
that, Chris. I guess in raptor populations in general, no, for the non-experts, the surplus birds are kind of these individuals that are basically unknown. Like, of course, many of us know about territorial pairs,
Mm-hmm.
but it is this unseen section of the population, which is, although they're unseen, they're actually very important. And as Chris
Right.
mentioned, they're the ones who would replace dying individuals. And if you have excess of that, then that can potentially be translocated or transferred to other places. And if I may share, this is also very interesting stats for Philippine Eagles. I know we've at the Philippine Eagle Center, or at least in two facilities that the Philippine Eagle Foundation maintained since the 1970s. Out of 89 birds, majority, 80% are actually immature birds. We seldom rescue birds that are adults. And during the pandemic period, out of 10 birds that we've rescued, all 9 are actually immature birds, no, from less than a year old to less than 5 years old. So we're sort of thinking that these are actually floaters, without territories, and then they're just hanging around and moving maybe between patches, crossing open areas, and that's when they encounter people and get trapped or shot.
So that
Wow.
makes them more vulnerable then to
Exactly,
being
because they're not tied to a
hunted,
particular
shot. Yeah.
territory.
Right.
Chris,
So
I've just. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
I just wanted to ask, like, so in our case, Sir Jay, what would be like an ideal translocation site for the Philippine Eagle? Like, what's ideal?
Well, as Chris mentioned, this should be, a place where there's adequate habitat. You still have
Mm-hmm.
intact forest. The forest still has huge, adequate amount of prey items for the Philippine eagles.
Right.
It should be adequately protected, and make sure that if we release birds there, the local communities would not trap or shoot the birds. And
Mm-hmm.
we're thinking of where we have some places where this could be possible. So, for example, in Leyte,
Mm-hmm.
I think I've mentioned to Chris this to Chris before, that
Right.
we've been surveying since 2013 in two large forest blocks in Leyte, and we have not seen or documented Philippine eagles yet. No, there are no
Mm-hmm.
nests, eagle nest found there within recent years, and then there's no rescues that ever happened. But there were historical records of Philippine
Okay.
eagles in that place. So that's in Leyte, and perhaps some sites in Luzon.
Okay. Sorry,
As,
I'm
yes, Andy, go ahead.
non-expert here, so I need to clarify something. So it's there has to be the habitat should be vacant, like there's no pair or surplus birds in it. Is that what you're saying? That would be
Yes,
ideal.
yes. Well, feel free to comment also, Chris. No,
Okay.
you have experiences also in this, more experiences.
No, vacancy is important, right? Because otherwise, if there's already a territorial pair there, you release this, probably just a floater, and that bird is
Right.
going to sit there and not breed for years until that territory becomes open. Or worst case scenario, it tries to uh, make that area part of its territory, and then you have a fight
Hmm.
uh,
Right.
between the eagles, and they don't need to be doing that. They need to be be breeding and raising young. So
Right.
vacancy is pretty
They
important.
shouldn't be fighting each other. That's
That's
not the
right.
goal.
Yes,
We're on the
yes,
same
Okay.
team.
All right. Got it. You were gonna
yes.
say something, Sir Jay? Go.
Well, I just remembered, my I don't know if I already told Chris about this, but I was very fortunate to do a over 1 month training in Panama
Oh,
with
cool.
the Pondo Peregrino guys there, doing work with the Harpy Eagles, and that's practically where we learned about using telemetry techniques, no, to monitor Philippine eagles. And it was a very nice and very fruitful training. I was able to handle a harpy eagle, no, a male
Wow.
harpy eagle for the first
Wow.
time. And yeah, it was a very foundational experience, and I'm pleased to relay that again, through the support of the Peregrine Fund, we were able to establish the same program, doing telemetry
Right.
work, and hopefully, we can extend this to doing conservation translocations if it's suitable for for the
Right.
Philippine eagles. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well, we've almost reached the 1 hour mark of our conversation. But just before we end, I just want to say hello to people who are watching us right now. You have a lot of friends, Sergio, who are watching us and greeting you happy birthday. We have Jose Enrico, Dionizil, Helen Donny says happy birthday.
Thanks,
Jordan
John.
is watching us from Quirino province. So is Imelda. Eugene is also watching from Quirino General High School. And then also, oh, we have a lot of people watching from Quirino province. And we have happy birthday also to you, Sir Jay, from Dina. Samuel, good evening. Thank you for joining us. LV, watching from DNR Region 9. Happy Philippine Eagle Week, everybody. All right. So I
Okay,
think
thank you very
it's time to
much
wrap
for
it up.
the kind greetings. Yeah, okay. So, well, Chris, we really appreciate this conversation with you. You really provided a lot of insights, and your experiences were really appreciated. And of course, on behalf of the Philippine Eagle Foundation and Andy, we would like to thank you, for taking time to join us and for sharing your experience.
Hey, thanks for
Thank
having me.
you, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thank
We
you.
hope you
Thank
had
you very much.
we hope you had fun too. Happy Philippine Eagle Week.
Yeah, same to you. And y'all are doing a great job putting this on. So congrats to you. And thanks again for having me. I'm always available to talk about birds. So,
That's
Thank
great.
you. Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you. All right. So thanks again, everybody, for spending your evening with us. I had fun. Sergey, I learned a lot. Medyo information
That's good to know.
overload, but
Yeah.
but no, it's really fascinating. I think yung translocation approach and knowing that the issues that and the challenges that our Philippine eagle is facing is not unique to that species only. Like other birds of prey from everywhere else is also there are also challenges and yeah, I think we're on the right direction in terms of really putting importance in our education campaigns, in
Right,
everything that we
right.
try to accomplish, right?
Right, and we're very fortunate and happy to have the Peregrine Fund as our partner in this endeavor. They really know the case of the Philippine eagle. They have followed it across the years. Our
Yes,
conservation breeding program was also assisted and supported by the Peregrine
yes,
Fund. So it's really nice
yes.
that they're still on board and helping us across the years.
Yeah, not to mention last year they were such a generous donor to us, helping us
Exactly.
when
Yeah.
we closed and when we were not sure yet what was gonna happen and all of that because of the pandemic. Huge help. So thank you, the Peregrine Fund.
Yeah.
And
So shout
yeah,
out, no, to Rick Watson and
yes,
Munir
Dr.
Virani.
Rick
Thank you very much.
Watson and Munir. Yes. Thank you so much. All right. So, again, thank you for spending time with us tonight. And we have our third and last episode tomorrow. And that guest with us is going to be Professor Stephen Garnett of Charles Darwin University, who will talk about Indigenous peoples and biodiversity conservation. He will be joined by attorney Ongi Canivel of the Forest Foundation Philippines as our reactor. So I hope you guys are having a great Thursday night. And once again, we would like to thank our partners, the Conversation on Conservation Philippine Eagle Week Edition is brought to you by San Roque Power Corporation and OmniPay Incorporated, together with PLDT, Ulticon Builders Incorporated, and Energy Development Corporation with the support of FBC Utilities Incorporated. So again, if you'd like to be part of this mission, please support us. You can make a donation through our website, philippineaglefoundation.org/donate, and contribute to the welfare of Salagbanog and Examon, who are currently under our care at the Philippine Eagle Center. Your donations will benefit them, Examon for its continued rearing and the care that it needs at the center, and of course, Salagbanog for its eventual release. Once again, thank you very much, and we hope that you will share with your friends and your loved ones all the things that you've learned tonight. So that's it for me. See you again tomorrow. Bye.